and then we're gonna do some other stuff. I put this, the Bitly, is it to the folder? Okay. Because I got mixed up again on the presentation, so I made a copy and I just wrote final presentation,
Okay,
but
so,
it's in the same folder.
okay, resources.
Hi. Somebody else just came in. Hey, how are you? Devin's got the unicorn. I have been coughing, so you can touch me at your own risk. I give people a warning. I didn't warn Jeremiah though. Sorry, I just shook his hand. I know Jeremiah's like, you didn't tell me. No, I have hand sanitizer. I took my emergency. Jeremiah, it's like. Okay, cool.
Alright, so these are bit.lys that are important today.
Okay.
The last one is for people to request a check.
Hey, listen, cut the check.
Yeah, so. You're not here.
I know.
No.
T-checks better have my money. Right, right.
Okay, well, we're gonna start with you. You ready?
Did you want to do a welcome? Want me to start?
Oh, I can.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you all for being here. This is our third Authentic Learning Lab on December 8th, 2018. We've really explored design thinking, discovery, how do we really look at authentic learning in our school from a different lens and engage our students in learning material in a whole new different way. We're really excited to have each and every one of you here today because I know it's a sacrifice of time, it's a sacrifice for your family, and I just love, love, love that each of you made time today to be here.
Who are you?
Today, I am the founder of TeachX. I am super excited that we have partnered with Redesign. Ms. Kosawa is really a dynamic teacher and facilitator, and she'll be walking us through how do we launch our students into authentic learning tasks, how do we investigate and scaffold our students to understand the critical and essential questions of our lesson, and ultimately, how do we build out this particular project that we want students to do and be engaged in. At the end of the session, we will have a teacher pitch where they'll pitch their ideas to students who will actually give feedback and let them know, like, will I even be engaged in that kind of project? But I like to do that in the classroom because ultimately that's what we are doing this work for. And then we'll close this evening out. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our partner, Redesign, Ms. Akosawa. She is amazing. I'm super excited to have her.
Awesome. Thank you, Monique. All right. Good morning. My voice is a little hoarse today, so I do apologize. Hope that you can hear me clearly. So again, just reiterating, Monique, we're so excited that you all are here for day 3, diving into authentic learning, the Redesign learning cycle, preparing our students for life after high school. So I'm going to start with a brief review. And so what I've done here for the presentation is I've backed up to the end of our last presentation, our last workshop, and just as a way of reviewing, as you all remember, what you typically would understand as review within the Redesign learning cycle, we call it synthesis or reflection. And we really encourage all teachers to provide an opportunity for students to synthesize what they're learning along the way. Otherwise, they don't really leverage the benefit of everything that you've put together and everything that you've taught them. So you can consider this to be our synthesis, right? So we, last time we were together, we introduced the redesigned learning cycle, which includes a problem frame and a performance task, and then scaffolding, creating a lesson that includes heavy scaffolding to help students be successful in completing the performance task. And so we're really just reviewing or synthesizing that information. So I'm modeling for you what I would suggest that you do with students along the way, and not just at the end. And so may I have a participant to read this first slide, or if you remember it from last time, you can read it and then also kind of summarize the significance of it. If not, just read it and I'll summarize the significance.
It says, in my first year of college, I will be expected to complete all of these different tasks. And we talked about how these are things that are expected of kids, but like, is this what's most important? Are these things really gonna help change their life outcomes?
Exactly. So, so when thinking about what we did at Redesign is we did some research to figure out what students would have to do after high school, right? Because, you know, middle school teachers always say, oh, the elementary school kids came to us and they weren't prepared. And then high school students come to us and say, the middle school kids came to us and they weren't prepared. And then, of course, college professors, right, say, students came to us and they were not prepared with the skills necessary to be successful in their first year. And I don't know the stats offhand, but I'm sure that you've heard the stats about the number of low income and children of color who have to spend so much of their college money taking remedial courses once they actually do get into college. And so we are hoping to, our goal is to push those skills back down to high school. So we did some research at Redesign and found that in the first year of college, students are expected to read 5,000 pages. So if you've not been reading your senior year of high school and then your first year of college, you're expected to read 5,000 pages. And this is the research that we've done. And I kept looking, I was like, first year? It's like, yeah, in the first year of college, right? Because you have four courses each semester. Students are expected to write 12 position papers. So 12 times they are expected, typically the average college student is expected to take a position and write an entire paper supporting their position with research, right? They'll take 8 examinations, do 16 lab reports, write 90 to 100 polished essays, 6 presentations, 75 text-based discussions, and 21 problem sets. So on average, this is what a first-year college student, no matter what high school they came from, on average, this is what a first-year college student is expected to do. And as Monique mentioned, above and beyond what's expected of them in college, we also want to encourage them, encourage teachers to also reinforce life skills, right? Because students may have different paths after high school, so we want to support their being able to be successful the first year in college, and then also learn skills above and beyond that have to do with the unique circumstances of their life. So after doing this research at Redesign, what we did is we said, well, how do we prepare students in high school to be successful at those various tasks? And so may I have another person read the top of this?
Is there any pattern to the underlying structure of challenging performance tasks found in the world?
Right. So within our high school curriculum, we took all those tasks that you saw in the previous slide, and what we said is, what if teachers began in high school structuring their units such that students would have to complete a performance task that allows them to build the skills in those tasks that we covered on the previous slide, right? So things like a multimedia presentation. What if they've done that several times by the time they've completed high school? What if they've actually done engineering design or done several speeches, infographics, etc.? So all of these performance tasks, descriptions of them and tools associated with them are on the Redesign website. So we've built out various performance tasks that teachers can use within while they're using the Redesign learning cycle. So if we could have anyone answer the question, when you look at these performance tasks, is there a pattern to like the underlying structure of the performance task? Is there or any relationship that you see when you think about pushing these down to high school and giving students the opportunity to do them?
Some type of product. We all focus on some type of product.
Yep. Yep. So they have to produce something at the end. It's not a worksheet. It's not a class discussion where I raise my hand and answer a couple questions out of the book. It's not a fill in the blank. They need to actually take what they've learned and produce something with what they've learned. Anything else that you notice? Any pattern? I'm not looking for any particular answer, but anything else you notice about the performance task that students really will have to do? Not only in college though, like in your professional environment, right? How many times have you had to do this? So it's not just college, but it's also professional environment. Anything else that you notice about performance tasks before we move on?
That you have to communicate to somebody else.
Yeah.
Some type of form.
Exactly. In some way or the other, you have to then produce something and then communicate your knowledge to someone else in some form or the other. And so those are absolutely the type of patterns that we thought about when we created the redesigned learning cycle. So within the learning cycle, there is, who remembers the parts of the learning cycle? I won't put anybody on the spot. So there was the launch. Who remembers like some of the investigate? That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah. Yeah.
Launch, investigate, deliver,
Create. Yeah.
deliver,
Yep.
and share.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So launch is when you launch the, yeah, good job. Where's the unicorn? Where's the unicorn? Yeah. So, okay. So launch, investigate is what I was getting at, right? So you all are familiar with the concept of launching a lesson, right? You're not just going to walk in, say you're teaching about World War I, you're not just going to walk in and start talking about World War I. Ideally, you're going to create some type of lesson, the unicorn. Ideally, you're going to create some type of activity that gets students interested in the lesson, right? I mean, it just goes easier, right? Like when you do that, we call that the launch. And that's usually about 20% of a lesson. But the bulk of a lesson is what, as Monique reminded us, is called investigate. Investigate is a process that we design that allows students to move through the knowledge and skills and information that they need in order to successfully complete that performance task. But this is where the bulk of our work comes in, because we really need to scaffold that process for them. And throughout that process, we're not only exposing them to the knowledge that they'll need for the lesson, we are also, if you want them to create a multimedia presentation within your lesson, within the portion that we call investigate, you probably need to do a mini lesson to teach them how to do a multimedia presentation, right? Now I see some I saw Jeremiah's eyes like roll up to the ceiling. I don't know if this is what he was thinking, but that's a lot of time. In our mind, we're thinking that's a lot of time. And so you can, was that what you were thinking? Yeah, yeah, his eyes like rolled up. I was like, yeah. So, but you can scale it back, right? And so multimedia presentation doesn't have to be an award-winning multimedia presentation. When you say multimedia presentation, it could be a PowerPoint presentation with 5 slides, 2 images, 1 video, and an infographic, right? So you determine the scope of it, and you can decide the scope such that you do have time within your lesson, like 10 minutes each day, to first give them a rubric, show them a sample, and then you kind of scale it down so that you teach them those particular skills. So you're not teaching them to be Steven Spielberg per se, but you can scale it down, right? So, but you can scale it down. And I know that there's standardized testing. I know that there's required, content. But it just goes much better even if you just spend that 5 minutes saying, here's what I'm expecting with a multimedia presentation. So in the investigate portion of the redesigned learning cycle, you are actually scaffolding to a T every activity and process that they need in order to be successful as they move toward creating that performance task. This is no different really than what you do when you're creating, so you can consider these as your individual lessons. The thing about it is that now they're embedded, right? So there's a systematic process that you're moving to in order for them to complete the performance task. So let's take, who wants to choose one of these from across the top? Choose a performance task that speaks to you. Somebody, anybody? Yes?
Multimedia presentation.
Multimedia, we're all about the multimedia presentation,
Yes.
okay? So as you are investigating within the redesigned learning cycle, these are the steps. So Jeremiah, read the first step. If so, Monique wants her kids to do a multimedia presentation, what's the first step? Explore the genre, right? So within your lesson, you want to provide students an opportunity to say, well, what is a multimedia presentation? What are samples, like we talked about, I just talked about the rubric. Show them some samples of multimedia presentations, right? Have them talk about what's a good multimedia presentation, because they probably already know. I mean, this is the tech age. They know what a good multimedia presentation is. So maybe even have a conversation where they come up with the criteria, right? But that needs to be a scaffolded part of the lesson. And so that is what we recommend as one of the first steps within the learning cycle, is that they explore the genre, right? What's the next step with a multimedia presentation? Troy, everybody can jump in. Yeah.
Identify topics and questions.
Okay, so if you're doing a multimedia presentation, they've explored the genre. Now you actually want to give them time in class to identify what their topic is. Now, depending on the grade level, you may give them a topic, right? But we do recommend choice. So even if you give them a topic, give them some choice within that topic, right? So let's say you want them to talk about leadership during World War II. You could give them a choice and say, this could be women leaders, or this could be male leaders, or this could be African American leaders, So we do recommend some choice. But the point here is that you're saying, hey, young people, you're going to do a multimedia presentation. You're going to explore what that looks like, what is going to be expected of me at the end. And now I'm actually giving you time in class, scaffolding activities where you're talking with your peers, exploring information. And so you are deciding what the topic is. We talked a lot about metacognitive modeling last time, or a metacognitive apprenticeship, where you walk students through the thought process. This is a great place to walk them through that, right? So you may say, I don't know, how do I choose a topic? Right, so you may even break it down for them. What are you interested in? What is there a lot of information out there about, right? Because I may be interested in something, but I may discover there's not a ton of information out there about that. So for this particular topic, I may choose a different topic. All right, so multimedia presentation, they've explored the genre, they've identified the questions. What's the next step? Somebody yell it out.
Determine audience and purpose.
Determine audience and purpose. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but what do you notice so far about the process that we are proposing to you, this investigate process? What are you noticing, even just looking down on the rest of them? What are you noticing about the process itself? Yeah, one leads to the other, right? So in the age of standardized testing and this prescribed curriculum, my observation is that we say, oh, students have to learn all this stuff. But when I look at the lessons, one is not really connected to the other one, right? It's like we're going to learn this and this, tomorrow we have to learn this, and then we have to do this standard. But for the metacognitive process, it is imperative that one leads to the others, and that students understand the connection and that they're moving systematically towards something. And then I had mentioned the importance of synthesis. As you're moving through these, you're going to provide them the opportunity to synthesize, right? So we don't want to become that thing that we hate, right? We don't want to become that. We don't want to like explore the genre today and tomorrow we're identifying topics, right? Without providing them the opportunity to reflect on the importance of what one has to do with the other. We want to scaffold that process for them of like, hey, yesterday we explored the genre. Now we're identifying the topics, and give them the opportunity to make that connection mentally, because they'll remember it better. They'll do better at the final outcome, and it'll mean more to them. Like they'll be more invested. They'll be more invested. Yes, ma'am.
So I already feel a little tension there.
Okay.
Because there's all this built in.
Yes.
There's all this built in time for reflection. Like all of these have to be reflective. They have to lead to each other. You have to help them see the connection.
Yes.
You're trying to help them understand that one leads to the other thing. For me, I give a rubric. I don't know, okay, so I give a rubric, and I'm like, here's the rubric. This is what you're doing. This is the final product, and we leap into content.
Right.
Because I need them to understand the content, so then they can get to the final product. And I realize I don't spend enough time on like what is the deliverable,
Right.
and what kinds of deliverable, like what is the totality of the genre that
Right.
you can go to. There are spectrum. It's a spectrum.
Right.
Definitely. We're not Steven Spielberg,
Right,
of course.
right, right.
But I don't think I explored that enough. But like the time,
Yes.
this tension
Yes.
is with the time. Like,
There-
where's the time for all of this discovery and,
Yeah.
and reflection?
Yeah. There's definitely. Go ahead, Jeremiah. Yes.
One of the things you said, if I'm wrong, each one of these would be a different lesson. So in
Not-
my mind, if each one of these is a different lesson, that kind of gives me that time
Okay.
to, you know,
Okay.
explore the genre, and you might need to help me clarify this too.
Yes.
Explore the genre, you're just defining what you want your final product to be.
Right. So yeah, it's explore the genre is what's an ideal. What is so you come in on school and you say you're doing a multimedia presentation. You actually give them opportunity to see multimedia presentation. Yeah, and say this is what high quality looks like. Yeah,
So,
and that's where you would introduce the rubric as well.
and then the topic, the questions, that's when you start getting more into content.
Exactly. And that was two. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off? Yeah. And so that, and you, Jeremiah hit on the two things I was going to respond to Monique and say is that, yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot of time, so I'm not going to lie about that. Two things, yeah,
That they could be lessons.
exactly.
Build them in as lessons that we would do each.
That's exactly.
I need to build in the time to make this each of us.
Yeah, and you could, and you would rearrange your lesson itself, right, to kind of build them in, because and so the second thing I was going to say is that yes, it is time, and so you're making other decisions about how you use time in class, right? Two, if this becomes consistent, it gets faster, right? So the first time, they're like, what's genre? What's it? By the end of the year, by the end of, if you have them for 2 years, if they go through teachers that have done this for 2 years, they're asking you, well, give me an example. Where's my rubric, right? So when you build in those classroom practices and that classroom culture, it actually goes much faster. And then your second question about content is that Jeremiah pointed out, you start content number one. Right? You can actually start content. You start content on the second phase. You're not waiting, right? Because identifying the topics, you're talking about content. So that can be, so you're actually designing lessons. So your lesson could be introducing the content and some activity where they start to explore the content, but they're also identifying topics as they're exploring the content. You actually can start content at explore the genre, right? Because the examples that you're going to give them ideally would be about that topic. So it seems like you're only doing one thing, but you can be doing 2 or 3 things, right? You're pulling out a multimedia presentation on, equations or whatever it is. And so it really is you as a teacher are synthesizing, but you do start content right away, right? Choosing the audience, right? You can pull in some content in the activity that you design that helps them decide, well, who's my audience, right? Who wants to know about this stuff? Why would they want to know about this stuff? You get what I'm saying? Because your audience for a science project is going to be different for your audience for an English project or a world history project. So in even just determining who their audience is, they're handling content.
Okay.
So you're welcome. So you can start.
It's not an either or.
It's not either or.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole kind of holistic way of thinking.
Okay.
And so this is an example. Again, we're just kind of synthesizing and reflecting on what we covered, what we got into during the last workshop. So this is an example of the investigate phase, or what an investigate phase of the learning cycle can look like. And this really is the bulk of the lesson, right? So launch is about 20%. We say that, I'm sorry, I keep saying lesson. This is a unit. This is a unit. Lessons within the unit, right? And so for a unit, 20%, about 20% is going to be launch. This is going to be about 60% of the unit, and then your time to kind of present and that type of thing would be the last 20%. So this really is these are your lessons. These are the lessons that you're going to design anyway, but you're designing them in a way that they build on each other, and that students are building skill and being exposed to content along the way in a very systematic way, and in a way that they can actually be successful in the final project. Does that make sense? And this is just this is another way to visualize the learning cycle, right? So making meaning is the launch, so they can do those 3 things within the launch. Then the knowledge building is the investigate. Then they're preparing the product, and then they're sharing out the product. So yeah, so this is just a visual of what those steps can look like within a full unit. And then another visual, so you're seeing the cycle itself. but it's the same information. We just showing it to you in a different way. So you see the cycle, and you see how synthesize is in the middle. You're going to synthesize somehow every day. Right? You're not going to wait till the end to synthesize. And then what Monique did is, because I know you all in this project, you are focusing on authentic intellectual work. And so do you want to say a little bit about how the learning cycle lines up? Because this is your, right, the discipline inquiry, the authentic learning? Yeah.
So the main three components of, and some of you may have the authentic learning rubric, and we'll talk more about that in next semester when we do we'll do virtual conferencing and group chats. But the biggest thing is making sure there is an opportunity for students to go beyond their classroom and engage with authentic stakeholders. And that's what TeachX provides through our platform, is the logistics in order to do that. So a lot of times you might have a lot of different ways that you're trying to connect with different people through email, through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through your DM, through a lot of different mechanisms. But TeachX primarily facilitates the communication channel between you and an external stakeholder in order to bring the real world into your classroom. And so ultimately what the authentic learning cycle does is it allows you to get students to have inquiry opportunities or opportunities for them to explore new topics that are relevant to them, and then have them kind of create or co-construct their own knowledge for themselves. Because a lot of times we kind of give them the answer or what we think the answer is, or they're looking to us for the right answer. But when you create a space and an environment where they can co-construct the knowledge alongside you and alongside other partners, then that has way more meaning for them in their learning, for them to retain it, and for them to have a deeper meaning beyond the classroom, which is the last step when they begin to go beyond your classroom and share what they've learned, or share their new findings, or share their product that they've built. And so we'll talk more about the authentic learning rubric and how what you're building needs to really have these key components, primarily connecting kids to outside of the classroom. If it only has value in your classroom, it's not going to be as meaningful and create deeper learning experiences for students.
Yep, awesome. So basically, when Monique and I were first launching the partnership between Redesign and TeachX, we said that the authentic intellectual work, this whole framework, is the what, and the Redesign learning cycle is the how, right? So within authentic intellectual work, you have discipline inquiry, co-construction of knowledge, and application beyond school. And then the learning cycle is a tool that helps you ensure that all those things are happening in the classroom. So those last three, it's the same concept. We're just giving you different visuals to understand how those things go together. And so in building common language, so we started during our last workshop, we talked about the language that we use around the learning cycle. So we talked about launch, investigate, create, share. And so one thing, when we talk about the project, we call it a performance task. And so in language is language, right? But the reason why we call it a performance task is because we usually, within the Redesign learning cycle, we introduce the unit with a problem frame. So it's a real world problem. And then they have to perform, they have to do some type of task to respond to that real world problem. And so for instance, the unit that we explored during our first workshop was a unit on food and on environmentalism. And so the problem frame for that unit was, how do we create a just food system, right? How do we create a just food system? Talk to me about that problem frame. Is that the same? Is that different? What do you notice about that problem frame to start off a unit?
It's clear and specific.
Yep. Do your units typically start with something like that?
My units in English start off with these very thematic concepts that are abstract.
Yep.
Like heroism in an age of tragedy. It's just
Right.
like, what?
Right. Yeah, and you can still study literature on heroism in the age of tragedy, but a problem frame that may be more pertinent to our students might be, how do you save your neighborhood? Right? You get what I'm saying? Like, how does one person make a significant change in the life of other people? Yes, sir.
One of the things that I guess kind of teach is internet safety.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a very big,
Yep.
very general thing.
Yeah.
How to stay safe on the internet.
Right.
And we kind of start with that. How do you stay safe on the
Right.
internet? Then you go into the different avenues of all different ways that you can kind of be in danger on the internet.
Right.
Then we get to, what do you do as a student to keep yourself safe?
Right, right. And how do you stay safe on the internet is a very relevant problem frame, right? So it's not something like internet technology and the age of security, right? It's it starts with the question of like, how do I stay safe on the internet, right? Yeah, right, exactly. And I love what you said. You get there. So we're not saying don't do the content. You get to the content, but the entryway is through something that's interesting to them, and they already. It's sort of like when I think about problem frames and performance tasks, because you introduce both at the beginning of the lesson. So I think about, what is that, the 007, something where it's like, this is your mission, should you choose to accept it, right? So like, you start the lesson with a challenge. Like at the end of this lesson, you're going to be expected to do this with that, right? And so for students, for some students, that's engaging. For like, oh shoot, right? Like I'm going to learn all this stuff and be able to create a multimedia presentation, etc. So just wanted to introduce you to the language. You should feel free to use, we're not trying to change anyone's language here. Like if you're already using a certain language at your school, we're not nitpicking in that way. But we did want to be clear with you what we're talking about when we talk about it. And then this is just kind of pulling it all together around the performance task itself. So we talked about multimedia presentations. We talked about infographics. Will you all read this silently and look at the various components of performance task, and then let me know if you have any questions? No. So this is the performance task, or what you would call the project itself. These are the various components of a strong performance task or project. Thoughts or questions about this?
I think the biggest thing I'm taking away today that I guess I just never thought about is investigation and the creation process. Like that, like not investigation, but like the creation process.
Mm-hmm.
Like what do I have to do to get my students to create, not just understand content and
Right.
apply.
Right.
I'm very like, what's the application? Like how do you apply?
Right.
Like how do we get there? But a part of it has to be a co-creation. Like I like really understanding co-creation is super important, not just me creating a rubric and telling them this is the standard, this is what you need to be successful.
Mhm.
But true co-creation means I'm working with you to help you understand and help me understand what you took away from what I just said. So when we looked at the rubric, it wasn't like, yep, you gotta do A, B, C, D, and that's your 100. It's what should A be? What should B be? What should C be? Like what should each criteria look like? And then what does it look like for you to do that in your own way, in your
Yep.
own unique way?
Yep.
And I think that's what I'm taking away from this. That I need to take more time in that phase of
Mhm.
them understanding what they're creating, how they can create, and like letting them decide what the standard criteria will be instead of me doing it all.
Yeah, and then that builds their skills, right? Their critical thinking skills, their engagement with the topic, etc. Jeremiah, were you going to say something?
I would say, yeah, that ties into the application and creation of skills.
Yeah.
When you're able to do all those other things, you're building those knowledge skills. They might not even be skills that are necessarily being assessed or
Right.
intentionally, or part of the
Yep.
objectives. It just might be skills that they just get
Right.
from doing all that stuff.
through that process itself. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, so that was basically our review from workshop 1. For those who weren't here, I know it was super quick, but I do want to do a reflection, a synthesis of the review. And what I'm going to ask you is, can you think of a very specific instructional move or activity that you've done that fits into a part of the redesign learning cycle? Share it with us and tell us how, right? So, because you've all done launch to some extent, right? You've all done investigate to some extent. You've all done projects to some extent. But now that we have exposed ourselves to this particular framework, think about an activity that you've done in your classroom and a specific component of the redesign learning cycle that it maps onto. Describe it to us and tell us how. Just maybe like 3 minutes to think about it, and then we'll share.
Can you say that one?
Sure. So just as a way of reviewing and synthesizing the whole idea of the redesign learning cycle and the performance task and problem frame, think about a specific activity, lesson, something that you've done in your classroom that maps onto the redesign learning cycle. Share that activity with us. Share which component it maps onto us, and explain to us how or why you believe it maps onto the learning cycle. Because you've all done this already. It's just, you've all done some of this to some extent. So I want to, we're just kind of mapping backwards. I'll give you 3 minutes. And it could be outside of class also. It could be something experiential. It could be something you did after school. And I'll model what I was talking about with the students as far as exploring the genre. So I'm going to be, as far as your response, I'm going to be looking for a detailed explanation of the component of the learning cycle. And what I want you to repeat back to me what we talked about as far as the important components of learning cycle.
Do we need to share the table?
No, I'm just giving you the whole 3 minutes and we'll share as a group. You have 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Go back to the slide, going to show me yesterday.
Sure. Oh, that's smart. Yep. I'll go back here so you can kind of see some activities. I'll be looking for a detailed summary and explanation. One more minute. Okay, let's start. Can I start with you? I don't have to. Yeah? Okay, great. Tell us your name.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
One thing we started this last week was we started talking about the civil rights.
A little bit louder, Stephanie.
We started talking about the civil rights, and then we started with two texts, the most daring of our leaders and Congressman Gallows' speech at the Democratic Convention in North Carolina. We're working on those. So that's our exploration of the genre.
Yep.
And identify the topics of the question is the civil rights movement actually, did it end in the 1960s or did it still continue today?
Mm-hmm.
And basically we're going through every step of this process in a sense. So our audience is on the Riverdale level.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you to pick one thing and attach one activity to it and explain to me how it attaches.
Well, the activity we had was determining and identifying topics and questions.
Okay, great. And tell me about that process. Yeah.
One portion of the text required them to talk about the perception of African Americans in society and how during the sit-ins, most of the activists, they would dress up in one of their best outfits, suits, ties, dresses.
Mm-hmm.
So the perception and what did they want to convey? What was the purpose of them putting on those outfits? And tying it back into us today, we're often considered, or African American teens or black teens, they're considered menacing or thuggish or anything based on their outward appearance. So how do we connect ourselves to that era and say, does it matter if you're dressed in a certain manner, whether you're in a hoodie or you're in a suit and tie, tying it both back and forth, even though they wear suits and ties, they were still beating them
Mhm.
abused in the same way here, you're in a hoodie, your pants are sagging or whatever it is, you're still considered a menacing threat.
Mm-hmm. So in the topic, you're having them compare civil rights then to now, and so within that reading, you're having them explore the topic or actually basically having them determine their position. That's what you're doing? Yeah. Okay. So you're doing choose a position, right? Kind of. I mean, I know it's hard to kind of pull it out, but I'm really because when I leave, I want you all to have a clearer sense of what each of these steps look like. And so based on that activity, which step do you think it aligns to most clearly, most directly?
Is choosing a position.
Choose a position, right? So she gave them the opportunity to explore these two positions, and from this exploration, they'll be able to say, yes, the civil rights movement did end at that time, or no, it's still going on, or were their strategies more effective or not, et cetera, et cetera. So see how the content is there, but the purpose of exploring the content is to get them to be able to choose a position, to take a stand on that. All right, cool. Thank you for going first. Who'd like to go next? I'm drilling everybody, so y'all.
The one I chose in my classroom was the Socratic Seminar,
Uh-huh.
where we were looking at Native Son. I got frustrated because they didn't understand literary analysis. They would just give me random, boring summaries. And I was like, y'all don't even know what literary analysis is, and I realized we hadn't explored the genre.
Mhm.
So I just had them, use database searches, their favorite friend Google, to look up different literary analysis on Native Son
Mhm.
before we got to the Socratic Seminar.
Awesome.
Because I just felt like it was really boring, which one of them was really boring and one was really great.
Right.
Because one group did a lot of exploring the genre
Yep.
and another group did not.
Very nice.
So we did the exploring genre piece, and we did a research wall based on what they found.
Mhm.
What were some of the ideas that came up within the literary analysis they found in Native Son and Richard Wright's book over the years. They had to identify their own topics that they want to talk about in the Socratic Seminar. Because at first I was going to give them ones that I found online. Then I was like, well, it'd be better if they picked them. Then they just picked a whole bunch of, I call them level 3 questions, which are, or tier 3 questions, which are questions beyond the pages, which they needed some on-page questions, but they had a lot of like, how would you feel in the world kind of questions. But that was fine for our first one. And then they They did the research, the issue. They chose positions on the analysis that they found. Like, do you agree with this analysis? If you don't agree with this analysis, then you need to explain why do you think the women were weak in Native Son, the black women, the white women, any woman. Why do you think he portrayed women as weak if you thought they were weak in the book? And they gathered details. They had the outline and draft, and at the end of the Socratic seminar, they gave each other feedback on what they could do better.
Awesome.
And I don't know if we went through a revision process, but we did, go through the actual Socratic itself.
Awesome. And I'm glad that you mentioned revision. And so you see here that we also encourage you to have the outlining, the revision process as part of the lesson, right? So it could be, that lesson could day, you could have them doing some peer review. You could have, one student sample work up in the classroom, but having that all as part of the lesson. All right, we have 2 more people. And let's, Troy, do you want to go? Okay, so I have 3 more people. Very quickly, try to choose one activity and match it to one. I mean, I know it's very holistic, but try to choose one activity and match it to one step, and be detailed in your summary about how you accomplish that. It's okay. Yeah.
I had to go back and look at one of my longer than cheating or not. So for determined audience and purpose, last year I taught computer science to 8th graders, and in our marketing unit, we were trying to develop or trying to think about marketing in general, how businesses advertise to different people. So what we did is we looked at different logos and we looked at different product designs. So there's like a YouTube video of different products.
Awesome.
So they looked at them to get some ideas, but also I had to ask them, okay, well, who is this product more
Nice.
catered to?
Yep.
Who are they trying to get to buy this product?
Very
And
good.
I saw like little Capri Sun boxes or the Kool-Aid boxes,
Uh-huh.
color.
Uh-huh.
And they realized, okay, this is for kids.
Right.
And they saw like the apple juice and kind of
Yep.
more, a little bit more conservative and basic. Those are for like some older folks.
Yep. Us older folks are not offended. Yes. that's fine.
That's my connection to determining the audience.
Awesome. All right, so you actually had them go through that process. Yeah, very good. 2 more. Who wants to go next? Troy, or I didn't get your name. I'm sorry.
Jacques.
Jacques.
Yes.
Very nice. Troy, who wants to? Troy, do you want to go next? You want Jacques to go next? Okay.
So just yesterday, with the team, we were building out a fundraising platform that allows you to give to universities easily.
Uh-huh.
And yesterday we did a testing session
Okay.
where we were trying to optimize the user experience to make it as easy as possible. So me and the mentees went through, and I believe that would be in the give and receive feedback.
Very good. Yep.
And also, they they made bugs. They fixed the bugs that we suggested,
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
on the fly.
Right,
so
right.
That would kind of be a combination of giving.
Oh, you
feedback,
combine it. You
right.
combine and you. I said choose one. I'm just kidding.
Like
Okay.
you said in the session, you may have
Right.
2 at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very good. And in the give and receive feedback portion, so remember, everything, we're teaching them skills, right? There's a way that you give and receive feedback, especially in a professional setting or in an academic setting. So you can actually teach them that. You can have a rubric. You can have sentence stems depending on their level, right? So you're not just going to say, what you think of this, right? You're going to say, this is how in a professional setting you tell somebody that something is garbage, right? Because there's a way that you say it, right? If it's my best friend, there's a way I say, well, that's trash, boo. But right? But if in a professional and academic setting, you can say, well, I wonder about so-and-so, or I don't see the connection to blah, blah, blah. So you actually, in the session, are teaching, you're teaching them the skill of giving and receiving feedback. Also with receiving feedback, right? You want to teach them how to be able to take critical feedback. You're not going to get an attitude because someone has said something. And so you actually model that for them. So you see how it's always skill and content. All of these are skills that they need for the real world. And so when you expose them to them, I'm not saying that you have to have a rubric for everything, but you want to do a little teaching as you go along, because they're just, and even as folks of color, right? And as folks of color, a black male giving feedback in a certain professional environment may or may not be received as well, right? And so you want to teach them those life skills as well. I mean, depending on your relationship with them, you want to teach them what this looks like in the real world, okay? Last but not least, Jacques. A little bit louder.
I'm just trying to get my.
Oh, get your thoughts together. Okay, cool.
So the project that I did with my fifth grade students about a couple years back was to do with Confederate monuments and whether they should be removed, whether they should be kept, and so I guess I'll go with choose a position.
Yeah.
The students really had the opportunity to really choose their position
Yep.
on whether they believe that Confederate monuments should stay as they are, or they should be removed. And it was really great to see, 10 and 11-year-olds should take a position.
Yep.
And really explore and really kind of back up their position and their claim.
Right. Awesome. Very good. And was there a process? I'm not not trying to put you on the spot. Was there a process where you were kind of teaching them what that looks like, right? Like, like kind of helping them refine and that type of stuff?
Yes, but I didn't want to give you too much.
No. Yeah, no, I know, right? I'm sorry. I did not mean to create that kind of environment. It's like, right. I appreciate that.
But we determined the audience that we were going to do.
Yeah.
We were debates. We determined that audience
Yeah.
would be their friends and their family.
Yeah.
And they got opportunity to research the issue.
Yeah.
We even got someone from Stone Mountain to come out
Nice.
and talk about Stone Mountain Monument.
Very nice.
And they even went through the process of thinking about redesigns for Stone Mountain.
Look at you.
So,
Yeah. Okay. All right, we got to give him the unicorn. So the unicorn is when somebody says something extra special, so you got to hold it until somebody else says. Yes, I love it. He's like, great. He's like, okay. All right, excellent. So can we pause for a second? I just want to make sure to check in with the time and see where we are. But for the folks who weren't here, you guys are like quick learners, right? You guys, I mean, this is basically the gist of what we introduced and what we explored in the last workshop. So this was sort of like our introduction, and then now, since we're all now on the same page, we're going to move forward. But let's pause for a moment, if we can, Troy, and then just kind of check in around lunch and time and all that good stuff. Any questions? Hey, how are you?